Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris turning in our metal cards for a week, and we're going alt-rock for the week, covering two classic Green Day albums that came out 10 years apart in Insomniac and The Warning from 2005. But before we talk about all things Green Day for the second time on the podcast, how are you, my friend?
Good. 5 years apart. Warning
5 years apart, yes.
2000. So
yes, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But a world of difference between the sound on these two albums. You're absolutely right. So I appreciate the correction. It's going to be an interesting journey down their catalog, I think, this week. I can tell you for a fact that in between listening to Green Day, I had decided to listen to some heavy music this week. And so a pair of albums that really just kind of stuck out to me, the new Orbit Culture, Death Above Life, picking up where Orbit Culture left off, really heavy, really groovy, just kind of like a wall of sound that hits you. And if you're into them, this I think is going to please the palate. If you've never been into them, I don't know that this is going to turn any corners for you, but a solid release from them. And another band that I'm really excited to see on 70,000 Tons, a band I never thought I would see live. Blood Red Hourglass has come out with a new album, and it's called We Should Be Buried Like This. And it's just as cheerful and enjoyable as the title would suggest. But kidding aside, excellent melodic death metal. This album, I think, has a little bit more keyboards than their last one, and so it's got some samples and sound effects in the background that really make it kind of an interesting listen and something that I've gone back to a few times this week. But that's what I've been listening to when I haven't gone back to Green Day. I'm curious to see if anything caught your ear this week.
Since about, I don't know, a week ago, I have been trying to catch up on some of the albums that came out this year that I hadn't listened to yet. A lot of them were like June and July releases. So I listened to the new Everon, A to Z, Catatonia, Volbeat, and then most recently Lux Terminus, Bush, and Crimson Shadows. So any of those that you would like to pick my brain on, feel free.
I'm specifically curious about the Everon. Believe it or not, you led with the one I'm most curious about.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. I didn't think anything was like too groundbreaking or out of this world, but it was an enjoyable listen. I think that was on your recommendation, so I'll definitely go back and check that one out again for sure.
I would recommend doing that and just check out the lyrics on that album, because there are some really poignant lyrics, which is not something I refer to often. But I loved the music, and so I thought it was worth a listen. But then when I was paying attention and listening to the lyrics, I was blown away by this release. And I'll be talking about this album again at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. Two of the albums that I mentioned that I really want to just shine a spotlight on. You had mentioned that the Bush album, I Beat Loneliness, that I think it came out in mid to late July. And you had said like the last thing you were expecting was for Bush to sound like Catatonia, and boy, you really hit the nail on the head. But I like really enjoyed this, and funnily enough, I really enjoyed the new Catatonia album too, which I was a bit late to the party with also. But I actually think I like the Bush album a little bit better. But they were both really good for like kind of melancholy, kind of like heavy rock. But yeah, like when you think back at those Bush songs from, around the time of the albums we're going to talk about today, like, Everything Zen and Come Down and Little Things, they were very hard rock and just very hard rock driven songs. I think it was kind of categorized as like post grunge at the time. But I think that it had a little bit more of like a hard rock kind of edge to it than an alt edge at the time, but this is like a totally different style from Bush, and I hadn't really been paying that close attention to where they've gone over the last few years, so maybe this is not surprising, but really interesting to hear them do an album like this that like could really be compared to a band like Catatonia. Just really, really just like hard to believe.
I never would have guessed that I would put those two bands in the same sentence, but I'm glad you don't think that I'm crazy, at least as it relates to this. It was an interesting listen, and I'm not going to say that every track gave me Catatonia vibes, but there were certainly more than one, and it was enough that I thought it was an apt comparison. Then when you go listen to the Catatonia album, I don't know that I'm ready to compare them to Bush just yet. So I'll give credit to where credit is due. But if this is the direction that Bush has gone in, call me intrigued. I don't know what inspired it. I don't know if Gavin Rossdale heard of Catatonia. I'd be curious, or if it was just his own thing and they just happened to be adjacent in that world. But I found it just so interesting because my knowledge, or the extent of my knowledge of this band, ended with 16 Stone. And I love that album. I think it's an interesting album and one we should cover because it does border on hard rock and metal in many spots. But at the same time, that was 30 years ago. So this was quite the departure, to say the least.
Yeah. The other album I wanted to mention was Lux Terminus's Cinder. I don't know if I just hadn't listened to a ton of this band prior, but I was kind of expecting like a more subdued experience, and I actually really enjoyed how the album kind of has like almost like a prog rock kind of instrumental, like poppy prog rock kind of vibe to it in spots, and I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I thought. There was a cool guest spot from Haken's lead singer, Ross Jennings, which I thought was cool. And so this is an album I definitely want to circle back to before the end of the year, because this one really caught me off guard in a good way. So that I'm happy to rejoin the conversation when it comes to at least stuff that's come out this year. That I still have a little bit more work to do. Next on the list, it looks like I am somewhere in the mid-August area, so not too bad.
You're getting there. You're making progress.
Yeah. But I've added a lot of things to the list, as you are well aware, the last couple of weeks. And there's still more to come. So it's been an interesting year. I feel like maybe not as many strong heavy hitters as last year, but I think there's more of a breadth of stuff that I've like really enjoyed compared to last year. So, maybe more quantity than quality, but still like I'm not really dead set on like my top 5 or 10 or anything like that. There's definitely room for movement. And there's still stuff I have to listen to, and there's still stuff that hasn't come out yet. So lots to listen to, lots to check out.
Nice. I look forward to that episode every year, obviously. So it'll be here before you know it. But this week I was listening to 2 albums, one of which I was very, very familiar with, and another one that I've listened to several times as well. So I was, rather familiar with, and that's Green Day. And before we talk about Insomniac and we talk about Warning, was the plan always to do both this week, or was the plan to do one and then you kind of just added on the other because of the anniversary?
I just had Insomniac on the bill, and then it I just decided to put on Warning. I've always considered Kerplunk, Insomniac, and Warning as kind of my 3 favorite Green Day albums, which I'm sure a lot of people who love Dookie would find hard to believe. And I don't know that any of those 3 albums are better than Dookie. It's just Dookie was the one that I think just got played to death. And so these other albums felt more fresh. So for that reason, I popped on Warning, and I was like, oh man, like this album, if memory serves, came out around the same time of year as Insomniac, because I remember it being towards the beginning of the school year when Insomniac came out. I would have been starting 8th grade. And when Warning came out, I would have been starting freshman year of college. So I just remember it like, yeah, it was like a fall release. And so I looked it up, and sure enough, like it's only about a week in between the two. So then I was like looking at the length of the albums, and I'm like, okay, it's like literally I could fit both of these albums onto a burned CD. So it's not like asking a lot, I think, to talk about both, especially considering that you were familiar with both of them. It just kind of made sense. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I really want to talk about both of these albums. Leave out, unfortunately, Nimrod in between, which definitely deserves a discussion as well. But I feel like both of these albums came out at a really interesting time for the band. And I feel like that they're probably both not remembered as well as Dookie, Nimrod, and American Idiot. I would probably say like those are Green Day's big three albums, as far as like popularity goes. So yeah, there's some parallels for me as a fan of the band, and also I think some parallels with where the band was in their, just in their evolution. And, you had picked Dookie when we talked about it, and I really enjoyed having that discussion. And like, I feel like I might have even been like overly apologetic for liking it as much as I did. And I think I've gotten to the point where I'm not going to apologize anymore. Like, Green Day is one of my favorite, like they were one of the influential bands for me, to get me into any type of like heavy type of music or anything. So, there'll probably be a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are probably going to skip this one. And then there's probably going to be some people that are like, yeah, I know, like, for a fact, our friend Justin is a fan of Green Day. And I'm sure that there's other metalheads that like Green Day. And I'm sure there's a lot of metalheads that detest Green Day, but it is what it is.
You're not getting Yngwie-style guitar solos, but don't tell me that some of these riffs couldn't be employed on a metal album. And some of the fast drumming as well. And I guess I'll say Insomniac more than Warning, but Insomniac especially has some songs that could be the genesis of a metal song if it was just either down-tuned or played just a little bit differently and whatnot. So I don't think it is a totally offbeat comparison, but at the same time, again, I go back to the fact that 5 years in between these albums and the band couldn't sound any more different. And so it's a fascinating dichotomy when comparing these two. Just to kind of set the table a little bit before we jump into this, the lineup's the same. It's Billy Joe Armstrong on vocals and guitar. It's Mike Dirnt on bass and backing vocals. It's Trey Cool on drums. Same lineup, but a lot changes. Insomniac comes out October 10th, 1995, and it comes out just a year after Dookie, an album that sold like 10 million copies. And as we've always said, and I made this reference when we covered Rammstein last week, very hard to follow up an album that was nothing short of a worldwide phenomenon. And as a result, and you alluded to this, I don't know that Insomniac gets the credit it deserves. And I don't know that it could have ever been what Dookie was, that just hit right place, right time, right sound, right production, etc. And so even if they made an album that was better than Dookie, which I don't think it's better than Dookie, but I don't think it's far away from Dookie, it was never going to get the adulation. And so it sold well. I think it like charted at number 2 on the Billboard charts, which is incredible, but it just didn't sell 10 million copies like its predecessor. So a very big drop off there, but a really interesting listen. And although it's not perfect, it's a fantastic album. And I'll just kind of lead in with the story of how I got this album, because I remember it like it was yesterday. And it's funny because as I kind of think back to this, I was in junior high school like yourself. I was in 8th grade, and there was a music store that opened on Grand Avenue in Maspeth, where I grew up, not far from where your dad had his practice, just the other side of 69th Street. And I was walking home from junior high school, and it was about 2 or 3 days before the album was released on October 10th. And I'm walking home from school, and this little independent record store had opened up. And in retrospect, it was a tiny shop. I don't even know how it stayed open for the year or so that it did. But I popped in early. I remember going up to the guy with a buddy of mine, my friend Glenn, and we went up to the guy and said, do you have Insomniac in stock? Now, we knew that it was coming out on the 10th, but we figured, we were in the area. Let's just pop in. And he's like, you know something? I have copies in the back. Would you like them? And so this was the first album I ever heard before its release date in my life. Now, obviously, now we're spoiled with promos and things like that.
It was your first promo copy.
Exactly. And except it cost me $17.99 or some ridiculous amount of money at the time, considering the album is 32 minutes long. But I remember buying the album, rushing home and playing it. And I was just like in shock that I had a copy of this thing before it was released, and now we're all spoiled with the internet and promos and everything. But this was the first album I ever heard before its official release date.
That's awesome. My story is I don't know if I have ever told you this, but I remember at the time Chris Cialone was somebody that I used to hang out with once in a while. And I think, so he would have been just starting 7th grade while I was starting 8th grade. And I remember he skipped school the day that this album came out to go to the Lake Success Shopping Center and go to the Wall and buy a copy of it. So when I got home from school that day, he came over to my house and I had a boombox or something in the garage. And it had a tape deck and a CD player in it. And I remember I recorded his CD copy of the album onto a cassette and listened to this cassette copy of the album until I, got my own CD copy of it. And I remember my very first thought was that first song on the album was something that Green Day had played at the MTV Music Awards in 1994, and everyone was like, what the hell was that? They were expecting the band to play something from Dookie or something they'd heard before, and they came out and they busted out Armitage Shanks, which literally no one had heard up until that point. And I remember going to school the next day and everyone being like, what the hell was that? What did Green Day do? I don't even know what that song is. And then turns out that it ended up being the first track on Insomniac, but that was my introduction to that album. I can't remember when I actually did get the disc, but I know I still have it because I remember the booklet opens up into a poster, so that the album art is only 1/6 of the entire art, and if you unfold it, it's this gigantic poster. I think if you buy I think I have the vinyl, the limited edition vinyl or something, and they use the full version on the vinyl, which is really cool. So yeah, I, being such a huge fan of Green Day at that time and knowing all 3 of those albums, start to finish, I was so excited for new material. But tell me if you remember this, because I remember at the time, and it's crazy to say this in 1995, but there was Green Day fatigue. People, I think, were just so tired of hearing Longview and Basket Case and When I Come Around. The radio played the shit out of those songs. And I think everybody just played the hell out of that disc. I remember by the time Insomniac came out, the people were just oh my God, Green Day's so over. Little did they know, that I feel like Green Day's biggest days weren't even to come yet. And I just remember them there was already a general feeling of, Green Day's coming out with a new album, who cares? And this is literally a year after Dookie. It's not like they took a 5-year hiatus. It's literally the next year. And so
there was definitely Green Day fatigue, but I would argue that it was the whole alt-rock grunge movement, which had been kind of everywhere for 4 years by this point. And it was coming to an end because by 1996, these bands were not releasing gigantic albums. It was almost like we talked about with the end of some of these hair metal bands when we cover albums from like Firehouse or bands like that were the late era hair bands that just kind of faded away. It was arenas one week and then, bingo halls the next, Paul Heyman. So like, I say that because I think the bloom had just started to come off the rose. Whereas if this album had come out, let's say Dookie comes out in 1993. In 1994, this album is probably a gigantic success and up there with Dookie, but it was bad timing. They had missed the boat. They caught on so late. But yeah, I agree. Those songs on Dookie were everywhere. Everyone played the album. 10 million copies, like I mentioned. This was going to be abysmal by comparison in terms of sales, just because of where they were and when it came out. And again, you're talking late 95. This is not even the beginning of 95. And by 96, the radio had changed and they were playing a lot of different stuff, but it was not this kind of rock music.
Yep. And I think that when Nimrod came out, after Insomniac, but before Warning, I think that was the album that kind of cemented Green Day as like this band that was, beyond a time period. Like they weren't going to be one of those bands lost to the grunge era. I mean, they never really were a grunge band. They were a punk rock band that just happened to come out during that time, similar to the Offspring. But I feel like A Time of Your Life was kind of like a seminal track. It's one of those songs by Green Day that I've like so grown to dislike just because of how overplayed it is everywhere. Like it's just the epitome of the last song at a school dance or in a television show or at the end of a movie. My
sister cited it during her salutatorian speech.
There you go. But I think that song cemented Green Day as like, it was almost like their final middle finger to the small California, punk community that so like vehemently called them sellouts. And we're going to talk a lot about that when we talk about Insomniac, because a lot of the songwriting is a reaction to that. But I feel like that really cemented them as a band that like is just always going to be around and stand the test of time, and that like people of different generations are going to listen to and enjoy. And then I think American Idiot really put the stamp on them that they were like, they were a band that spanned decades. But when we, rewind back to this period of time, it's kind of like nobody really knew where this band was headed, what their legacy was going to be, including the band themselves. They're still in their early 20s at this point. And this album really is a reaction to both the absolute like snowball of success that the band got from recording Dookie, while also getting so much flack and pushback from that small West Coast community that they came from as this underground punk rock band. And by creating, by making Dookie and hitting it as big as they did, they were pretty much banned from their old club and that community, and they were basically looked at as sellouts. And so
when all they did was sell out every freaking record store, imaginable. It's like they were a victim of their own success.
It's hard to believe that anybody else in that position wouldn't have taken the opportunity to, sit down with a renowned label and producer and record a really polished version of what they had been doing up until that point. But it's, it's the sort of thing where and I think it's something that we as like metal fans can relate to, because we listen to a lot of really obscure music. And so like, there's a part of you that loves the fact that like there's an intimacy there where it's kind of like, it's our thing, like us and like a handful of people. And like, there's something really cool about that. There's something really cool about going to Prog Power and like having somebody from Voyager, like know your name, like there's something really cool about that kind of community. But at the same time, like, at least I could say now, I would want nothing more than for Voyager to become the most like famous, like well-known, like popular band in the world. Like nothing would thrill me more because they deserve that sort of success. But there was just that kind of feeling of like, you know, you ditched us, you ditched what we like meant, and what like all this is it's an underground anti-establishment thing, and now you're the establishment, you know. So a lot of the songwriting on this album is kind of like a reaction to that, and not just lyrically, but I just think like just sonically, it's a really more abrasive album than Dookie. It almost is like they took some of that polish away, and there's a little bit more of like a aggression and an edge to it.
Which the metalhead in me appreciates. But to your point, not to belabor it before we talk about the albums, I remember seeing so many bands in small clubs like L'Amour's in Brooklyn where there were 30 people there. And then now seeing these same bands in venues that hold 100 times the size. Symphony X, seeing them with 10 people, and then all of a sudden they're playing rooms of 1,200 or 1,500 people. And I don't begrudge them at all. I'm happy that they got the success that they did. And I'll never forget the fond memories I have of seeing bands like Pure Reeves and Revolution in front of 6 people, literally 6 people. I counted them. Half of them I was with for that show. But like, I say that because when bands get popular, that's a good thing. And and genres need that. Otherwise, you're not going to get new blood because nobody else is going to write music in that vein. And so I hear you. And I understand that they were shunned, but you know what? Kudos to them, and kudos to them for releasing an album like this, which was kind of had the angst that came along with where they were at the time. So I guess with that backdrop, you had mentioned that first song, Armor to Shanks, and I'm curious because when I hear this song, the first thing I think about is like, this is a continuation of where Dookie left off. It's the perfect opener in that sense. It's upbeat, infectious verses, and those Green Day vocals that are just layered in spots, which they've always done, and they do it so well on the albums. But what I loved was the bass that just pops in the mix, especially on a song like this. And then there's this one section in particular where the band kind of fades out, and it's just that little drum fill before the band takes off again. Just a well-constructed tune, and heavy enough that like even a metal fan would be like, yeah, I can appreciate the melody here.
I was obsessed with this song. I remember I like recorded a replay of the MTV Music Awards I mentioned earlier on an audio cassette, just so I could listen to that song because it hadn't been released. I mean, that award show took place about a year before this album came out. So, I always really liked this song, and so I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was, I mean, for all I knew, it was a friggin' cover by some, Bay Area punk band that I'd never heard of before. There was no context at the time. There was no internet to like go look up and see where the hell it came from. I'm sure the internet existed. I just didn't have access to it. But yeah, I've always been a big fan of the song, and I always thought that it was kind of an underrated tune. And I'll just say, like, these two albums in general are very underserved on Green Day's live set list nowadays, which is a shame because there's a ton of really good stuff on both. On this album, I tend to think that like Brain Stew is probably the only song that really has like a regular rotation in their live set, and from Warning, I would probably say
Minority, I guess.
Yeah. Minority, like they don't really play anything from Warning. I think even less so than Insomniac. So, really cool, really just great opening song. I want to point out there's this book that I have by William E. Spivak. And he has this series of books called On Track, and it's literally like every single song by a band in their catalog, and it kind of goes into, the lyric, what the lyrics meant and what the song is like. It's pretty much a lot like what we do, but in book form. And I found it really helpful, and I'll probably pull some quotes from it as we do this. But on this one, I'll just pull a quote that was from Billy Joe himself. Also, just for a little bit of context, Armitage Shanks is the name of a toilet company in England. So, which I did not know until this week. So, interesting fact there. But anyway, Billy Joe said, this was in Spin Magazine in 1995. He said, it was right before Dookie came out, and I was really at odds with myself. I was like, man, do I really want to do this? A lot of time I was thinking about suicide, how it's so easy to kill yourself, but it's so hard to stay alive. I was in a breakup with my then girlfriend, a total raving punk rocker who didn't approve of me being on a major label. She moved down to Ecuador saying she couldn't live in a world with McDonald's and such. It was effing me up pretty bad. And so, like, just to give you an idea of like where his head's at, he's pretty much given credit for writing, I think, every song lyric on this album. The band typically takes like a co-credit on all the music, but Billy Joe is like the lyricist for the band. And so there is a very like kind of like a feeling of being kind of lost when you listen to the lyrics. Also, like some of the members of the band were experimenting with meth, which like there's literally a couple of songs that are like pretty clearly about that. My understanding is that this was a recording session fueled by meth and coffee. So that might have explained some of the kind of franticness to this album compared to Dookie's kind of more polished output.
Nice. I think that is wonderful context. I'm curious about Brat, the second song, and I asked that because it's a really solid tune, but to me the vocals really get a chance to shine, and I don't think anyone would say that Green Day vocals are up there with Jeff Tate or anything like that, but it certainly fits the music, and I think that Billy Joe's vocals on this particular track are great. The verses are good, and actually I think improve as the song goes on. But the chorus, I think, is the real highlight, and I just enjoy the simple little bass solo. This song, though, much like a lot of the songs on this album, really freaking short at a minute and 43 seconds, and I think my description might be longer than the song.
It's possible, because I'm listening to it while you're talking, and the song's almost over. So I always thought this was kind of a cool song lyrically, because it's just about like this lazy kid or guy or whatever who doesn't want to work, and he just is waiting for his parents to die so he could get his inheritance and not have to work anymore. So interesting concept. I always thought this was an underrated song, and I like that it follows the first track and just keeps the energy rolling. I thought it has a really, really infectious chorus, and it just maintains that just classic like thrashy alt rock guitar with I think Trey Cool is an underrated drummer. There was an interview saying that I think he had, him and his wife had their first child around this time. So a lot of the angst that he had from having a newborn child, he basically said he took out on his drums, lack of sleep and all that. So, but yeah, another really good tune that I really like. And I feel like I had heard that Green Day snuck in the song The Grouch, which was a track from Nimrod that's not terribly different from this one, at least like lyrically. And a lot of people were excited about that. And I wish like they would do a little bit more of peppering in some of those deep cuts, because I feel like the diehard fans really get a kick out of that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm going to point out a few songs throughout the course of this episode where I'm like, this is what I would love to hear live, because it would be so unexpected, but so awesome. What I did not realize is that there were 3 singles from this album, and I vividly remember 2 of them. I had no idea, or at least have no recollection, that Stuck With Me, the third track, was actually the second single that was released, because I think it's sandwiched between 2 songs that people probably remember being released as singles during this time. Stuck With Me, maybe a tad slower, I'm not sure, but again, the bass plays such a prominent role in this song. Solid verses. I think the guitar parts are a little bit bland, but the chorus always jumped out to me, even going back 30 years. I don't know that it's the best song on the album, but it's a solid tune, and I just love a lot of the drum patterns on this one. I just had no recollection that it was a single. I don't remember it as a single either, although I did later on discover the music video for it, which the entire thing is like the Insomniac album cover in like live movement form, which is really cool. There's no like actual people or the band in it. It's just kind of like a very arty video, really cool. But over the years, this has become one of my favorite Green Day songs, and it's going to be my song of the week. Just a huge fan of this one. I want to say that it's underappreciated, but like you said, it was a single, so it couldn't have been that underappreciated. But it's just just a quick in and out banger of a tune that I think just is. It never slows down. It's just I don't know. I just like really love this track. It's just really captures what I think Green Day was trying to do around this time, and a lot of it was really like just about the negative experiences with being famous, you know, along with, especially with the line, "I'm not part of your elite, I'm just all right." And it's almost kind of like, you know, we just want to be regular guys. And it's like, it's you kind of past that point. But anyway, here it is. I feel like we probably should have discussed like how we're handling Song of the Week because we're covering 2 albums. But I guess we could just talk about that while everyone else listens to the track. So here it is.
I'm not part of your elite, I'm just alright. Clad structures waving colors bleeding from my throat. Not subservient to you, I'm just alright. Templates by the powers that begin the loss of hope. Cast out, buried in a hole. Struck down, force and made of love. Destroyed, given up the fight. Well, I know I'm not alright. What's my price and will you pay it if it's alright? Take it from my dignity and waste it till it's dead.
So that was Stuck With Me, the second single from Insomniac. But I do have vivid memories of Geek Stink Breath, the first single, and when it was released about a month before the album. And I think that's how I knew the album was due out, because again, pre-internet days, or at least for me. So when I went into that record store to buy the disc, I must have known that the album was coming out. And it must have been because they announced it when they were playing Geek Stink Breath on the radio. Now, I gotta say this. I've always thought this song was grossly overrated, and I actually think it might be the worst song on the album, and which is interesting because I don't know if it was because it was played out, but it has a heavy punk feel to it. It actually reminds me a lot of Rancid, and it's not that it's a bad song. I actually think the verses are really good, but I always thought the chorus was weak, and I never understood why they chose it as a single. I thought that there were better representations of what the album was. I will admit, though, that it's gotten better over the years. But again, I would not have led with this as a single.
Yeah, and if you remember the music video, it was like even weirder. It was like literally like this guy getting a tooth pulled, and like it was, and being that the song is clearly about, you know, meth use. Apparently the video ended up getting like banned on MTV after a certain point, and so like you're cutting off like some of your, you know, MTV still had some cachet at this point, and so like you're cutting off your a big, you know, source of where your output is going. I was never a huge fan of this song either, and I thought it was a weird choice for the first single, especially when you had that ready-made opening track that they had played at the awards that they could have went with, and I think would have, like you said, it felt like more like a natural progression from Dookie. So like, this is a song, I think, same as you, it's grown on me a little bit more over the years, but I just never was a huge fan of it. It's kind of mundane, and I can't really relate too much to a song about methamphetamine usage. So, interesting choice, and I feel like it kind of feels a bit like an outlier on this album.
For my money, they should have picked the next track as a single. Now, it's got a bit of a Welcome to Paradise feel. I've always thought that, so maybe that's why they didn't choose it, but No Pride is a criminally underrated Green Day song. The guitar riff is great. Eventually the drums and the bass both join. But it has this fresh, rebellious quality to it that I love. The chorus is a complete earworm, but the drums on this track absolutely steal the show. It's not complicated. I mean, this is not prog metal or anything like that, but the song itself is just perfect. And I almost chose it as my song of the week. It was between this and something else, and I think I've gone back and forth about 12 times, but I'm not going to choose it. I will just say that people should listen to this song, and I wish the band wrote more songs like this nowadays, or at a minimum played a song like this live, because if I was at a show and they played this song, I'd completely mark out.
Agreed. I mean, I actually have an entire list of songs that I feel that way about when it comes to this band. I probably, if I made like a dream set list, that I don't know that there would be more than 2 or 3 singles on an entire, 25 to 30 song set list for me.
But to that end, I think this might be in the top 5 songs that I would kill to hear live.
Absolutely. Like, there are certain songs that are like, if I had heard it, like, I would absolutely lose my mind. Like, it's funny because, like, when I talked to Michael Wycath, and he was
about
talking
Green
about,
Day,
like,
or no?
No, he didn't come up. He was just saying, like, I could do without Dr. Steen, and, like, I could replace Dr. Steen with so many songs from so many different bands. I'm sure there's people, Van Halen fans, that feel that way about Jump. I'm sure, Rush fans, I know for a fact, feel that way about Tom Sawyer. My friend Jay, who's a diehard Rush fan, hates that song with a fiery passion. And same with Green Day, like, Basket Case was a song that, like, absolutely changed how I feel about music. Don't need to hear it live. Like, don't need to hear Longview. Don't need to hear When I Come Around. Like, I'm good. I especially don't need to hear Time of Your Life. There's just so many of these greats. Like, there's half this album would probably be on my set list, honestly, and No Pride would not be out of place being there. It's a really good song, and again, kind of a slap back to their old Gilman Street crowd that kind of crapped on them after they made it big. But I really like that song too, and it's one of my favorites on this album, and there's a handful of other ones too that are coming up that I really like. Babs Uvula Who, which I, for my whole life, always wondered what the hell the song title meant, and apparently it's a reference to a Gilda Radner skit from the early days of Saturday Night Live. I'm gonna have to dig a little deeper into that, but
so I was today years old when I found out what this meant, because I always was curious, but as I was kind of getting ready for the episode, it goes back to a clip from Saturday Night Live from 1976, and it goes back to a knock-knock joke where Chevy Chase is making a joke to his patient, Gilda Radner. And it's funny because it kind of has nothing to do with the song itself. So I don't know why they did it, but I guess it was a bit of an inside joke. Very interesting. What do you think of the song itself?
It's solid. I think that it's wedged in between 2 songs that are better, in my opinion, between No Pride and 86. But it's solid. It's a good song. I just I think that it has a lot of energy to it, but it's not as good as Stuck With Me, I think. But it's good. I think
it's
really
aged
like
well.
Yeah, I just really
I like it. And like the vocals at some point outpace the relatively fast song, and I think that's kind of cool because it's just not really done. Usually the vocals and the music itself is in sync, but here the vocals just go off the rails. It's a really interesting song, and another one that would just be cool to hear live, although I don't know it would be my first choice. There's something about this song which I guess is a little proggy in a sense, and so I kind of like it, but at the same time, not my favorite song on the album, but deserves to be there. No, certainly.
Yeah. I just really like 86 a lot. And I love
86 is...
I love that as soon as Babs Uvula Who ends, it's like a really short break between that song, and then all of a sudden you're hearing those just classic Trey Cool drums, like, and right off to the races on the next song. And I just think this is a better song in general. And this has always been one of my absolute favorites on the album. I think I made a Green Day greatest hits disc, like back when probably Warning was the newest album. So it would have been before American Idiot. And I think that I had 86 on that mix. This would be a song, if they played this live, I would lose my mind.
86 sounds to me like something that could have and maybe should have been on Dookie, because it has that polish that some of these songs lack. And it just brings me back to when I was 13 years old. And something about that I absolutely love. And that repetitive chorus is just so catchy. This is a banger of a tune. I love 86, so I'm with you in lockstep here. And then we move ahead to Panic Song, and this one is another interesting track because it has this extended instrumental intro that just reminds me of the Ventures and surf rock and that whole scene. And the song itself would move away from that towards the back end, but after the first 2 minutes. But I actually love the second half of this song, and I wish they would have done something else with one of this, like the melody here, because it's one of the best melodies in the catalog. It's just an interesting song construction because it's like a tale of two songs.
This is a song I didn't appreciate as much when I was younger, because I think that there's so much of the beginning of it is like almost like they're dragging their feet to get to the actual meat of the song. But now that I'm older, I really appreciate like this build up, and the song is aptly named because both Billy Joe and Mike Dirnt were struggling with panic attacks even at such a young age around this time. And so this song feels like a panic attack, especially the beginning of it. The book kind of likens it to it says they don't just start with a fascinating 2-minute buildup made of Pete Townsend windmilling arm power chords, but the chaotic rhythms that Trey revs up intensify as they build, and you could just feel the explosion about to happen like a volcano's heat before it blows. And it really is a great way to describe it, because once that kind of surf rock vibe ends, it cuts right back to what the band had been doing on this album up to this point anyway. But I've learned to like appreciate this song a lot more, both from a mental health standpoint, but also from a musical standpoint, just because I feel like when it does get to the actual lyrics of the song, it feels like you kind of like really earned your way to that point in the song. And the second half of the song is really catchy, like you said, and it makes for an enjoyable tune. It's kind of a cool, different, it's like they're already starting to experiment with different sounds, and there's an entire track on Nimrod that's just a complete surf rock, like a mid-tempo surf rock sound. So this, I think, feels almost like a precursor to that. Yeah,
well said. It's the longest song on the album too, so I think there's something to be said for that as well.
At a minute and a half.
Exactly, at about 37 seconds. No, talk to me about Stewart and the Avenue, the 9th track. I know this is one that you love. Does it hold up for you?
Oh yeah, this was on that greatest hits CD too that I made. Just a absolutely memorable opening bass riff that I feel like Green Day has so many songs that Mike Dirnt is just like the star of, and just like on a whole, there's not a lot of bands that I feel like keep their bass in the mix as high as Green Day does. Like that bass is on par with the guitar part, just sonically. And I think
it doesn't take a backseat at all. It is
right.
Incredible how,
and much like Rush, who I mentioned earlier, this is for the longest time, this was a 3-piece band. So like, each member really had to shine when it was their time to shine. And so I really like that opening bass riff is so memorable to me. And the whole song is just so catchy and enjoyable. And this is one of the best songs on the album.
I was sad when this was revealed to me that this was not about the street in Garden City near my house, but rather a street in California, specifically Stewart Street and Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. That being said, this is my song of the week. This is my favorite song on the album. It was close. I know Pride was up there, but there's something about the way this starts off, like the bass, like you mentioned, and the lyrics that just resonate with me, that is infectiously catchy. And although this isn't metal, it just puts a smile on my face. And it kind of reminds me of like all the good parts and none of the bad parts of adolescence and being in junior high school. So I want to give it a listen, and we'll continue on with the rest of the album. So that brings us to Brain Stew and Jaded, two tracks that run into each other and would serve as the third and final single, another single that got tremendous radio play around the time of its release. A bit played out, but that guitar intro is certainly vintage Green Day on Brain Stew. And it's repetitive, but I think it made for a decent radio song at the time. I particularly like the end, how it just starts to get a bit wilder and wilder, and it leads into Jaded, which is much faster by contrast, and quite frankly, my preference of the two songs. It reminds me a lot of what you would hear on those first two Green Day albums before Dookie, and I guess for that reason, I really enjoyed it. It's a short song, Jaded. You're in, you're out, and you're, but in the middle of that short in and out, you're hooked. And I think that is because of the drums that provide just the perfect groove and complement to this song.
I want to just quickly circle back to Stewart and the Avenue,
Sure.
because there's a great quote in this book about that song, and it just says, "Stewart and the Avenue is such a jolly sounding song that its pessimistic lyric is not a match made in heaven." So I love that quote. Another quote, as far as Brain Stew goes, perhaps the best use of grunge's stop-start dynamic. This song covers various moods ranging from the boring, slurred, slithery, sleepy vocal to the scratchy guitar breaks that divide the verses from one another. I think that this is such a great example of like what the band like just reaching out of their comfort zone, or maybe this is their comfort zone, but just not doing. This is a song that you would not have heard on Dookie at all. It was very different. And it's kind of it stood the test of time. It's definitely got to be the most remembered song from this album. I remember it was like part and parcel with Jaded. Like even the music video was like combined, and like literally they were two separate music videos for the two parts of the songs, but they were always played together. And again, another quote from the book, it just says, "If Brain Stew was sleepy, Jaded is Brain Stew leaping out of bed, shocked by the ringing sound of a speedy alarm clock." And that's such a great way to describe it, because the two songs have like absolutely nothing similar. And so like Jaded kind of brings back that really speedy kind of punk rock sound. I think that I've kind of killed both of these songs over the years, and so does the radio and everything else. So like I don't look at them as fondly as probably I would have otherwise, but I do like them both better than Geek Stink Breath. I'll say that. It's just like I wouldn't be upset if I didn't hear either of these songs in a live set.
I can appreciate that. What I will say though is, as we move ahead to Westbound Sign, low key, the most underrated song on the album. I think this track, slightly slower. The guitars, again, remind me of Welcome to Paradise, but the verses are really catchy and provide such a nice contrast to the chorus. I think that this is one of those songs, again, where I could just close my eyes and I am transported to my room as a 13-year-old. Just really, really cool stuff that makes me happy to just reminisce about certain things. Low-key Song of the Week candidate, and it's not even close. I was surprised at how much I love this song, because I remember the song. I just don't remember loving it as much as I did 30 years ago.
I never really appreciated this or the next song, Tightwad Hill, and this is, of the two, I think, the better track, and I appreciate it way more nowadays. I hear it, and I think it almost because there were so many great songs up to this point, plus like the singles, that like I feel like at this point it's kind of like, you know, it's that point in the album where like I think you, in your mind subconsciously you're kind of losing interest in the album, even though it's a very short album, like you mentioned earlier. So maybe at the time, as a kid with the short attention span, you know, I was kind of like, all right, like I'm ready to listen to the next thing. But yeah, this song I think is underappreciated by fans and myself as an individual, and it would be another cool song to hear live. And apparently it's like one of the few songs on the album that was like, it's one of those things you don't realize, but like, especially in those early days on the first two albums, like a lot of those songs were love songs that Billy Joe was writing to Adrian or like some of his girlfriends at the time. Like it's, you go back and look at some of those like lyrics from like 39 Smooth, like 1,000 Hours and Dry Ice. And you're like, man, this is actually kind of sappy. And even on Dookie, there's a bit of that. And on this album, I think there was so much angst that like there wasn't a lot of that. And this was like the one song that was really about his wife Adrian moving to California from Minnesota, like literally seeing that westbound sign and heading out to be with Billy Joe out in California. And something I never really realized is that he hints at that in the bridge, because there's a lyric that is Tragedy 2,000 Miles Away, which, if you recall, was a song from the Kerplunk album. So, I agree with you. This is a very underrated song, and clearly we both underrated it ourselves.
Yeah, no argument. And I definitely like it more than Tightwad Hill. I would say Tightwad Hill is solid, but well placed on the back end. Not exactly a standout tune, but a solid tune that it was kind of a standard for Green Day at the time. But for some reason, I don't think it clicks quite like some of the ones that have come before it. It's got the right formula. I think it just misses the sizzle a little bit, but it's well placed before Walking Contradiction, the final track.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of the song. I'm still not the biggest fan, at least compared to the rest of the album. It's good. I love the my favorite part is probably the layered vocals, because whereas most bands will just have their singer sing a high and a low part, Green Day actually uses the fact that Mike Dirnt is a serviceable vocalist to have him do the melodies with Billy Joe. And this song, I think it really stands out. Not my favorite song in the world, but I think it like you said, it makes for a good penultimate track before Walking Contradiction, which is, I think, one of the more well-known songs from this album. One of my all-time favorite music videos. But this is a song that has really stood the test of time for me, and I still really enjoy hearing it. And it has a little bit more of that tongue-in-cheek humor that Green Day was known for on their first three albums, that I think really was kind of missing from this album up until this point.
Yeah, it's a good closing tune. It's definitely one of those songs that I move my head to. I think the verses and the chorus are both very good, but quite a bit different from each other. I'm not sure that I prefer one to the other, but it does feel like you get some closure with this song. It just has a different feel, though, than the rest of the album, without that angst and that anxiety. But all in all, even though it's not a long album, it's a really solid album. And just, again, top to bottom, grossly underrated, because they don't play most of this stuff live anymore and haven't for decades. I'm really curious about your score on this. I know that Dookie was a 9.5 for you, if memory serves. It was very highly rated, and understandably so. How close does this come, or does it eclipse it?
I will say, I want one last thing on Walking Contradiction.
Yeah.
I tried to find if anybody has made this comparison before, and I could not find it anywhere on the internet, but the song reminded me of, do you remember the song What I Like About You? It's
oh yeah,
I want to say it came out in the 70s. Was it the Romantics? That's who did the song. It came out in 1980. There's something about the construction of the song that reminds me a lot about this song. I don't know if it's just the tempo or the riff or whatever, but I couldn't find anybody else who made that comparison. So
Nice.
I was able to find somebody who made a comparison to Stage 2 and Double Dragon 2 sounding like Phil Collins, but not this. So go figure. Getting back to your question, I did give Dookie a 9.5, and I did say that there was a time where I considered this one of my top 3 Green Day albums. I don't think it's as good of an album, but for some reason I've held it in higher regard because it just is a little bit less played out. That said, I don't think I'm going to rate it as high as Dookie, which I gave it 9.5. I'm going to give it a 9, though. Like, it's still like an all-time great album, in my opinion, and it still holds up. It could use a little more meat, though. It's like you said, it's really short, but all the songs hit. I really only like dinging it for not really loving some of the singles that much, and Tightwad Hill not being my favorite song in the world, but the rest of the album really holds up the score for me, and then you just have that nostalgia, pull for me. I don't know that there's very many Green Day albums from like 21st Century Breakdown and back that I would give probably less than an 8.5 in all honesty. But yeah, I was curious where you were at too, because I know you gave Dookie a 9, so I assume this is not too far behind.
No, much like yourself, I have had a half point below. I have it at an 8.5. Certain albums and certain songs bring me back to times and places, and this does, and I love it for that reason. Again, not a perfect album, a little less polish, but really, really good, and just a pleasure to listen to. And I think at this point, I even go back to it more than Dookie because I haven't played it out as much, and so I appreciate that. Although admittedly, it had been a while going into this week. On the other hand, we get to Warning just 5 years later. It comes out October 3rd of 2000. So 5 years and about a week prior. But I say that because this has such a different feel to it. And as I was listening to this album, I was full on in my metal phase, right? Like October of 2000, Dream Theater, Prague, Iron Maiden, that's what I'm listening to. I say that because I'm familiar with Warning. I don't know that I ever connected with it like I did with Insomniac 5 years prior. That being said, I would argue that American Idiot is probably my favorite Green Day album. I love that album, and I can't wait to talk about that because there's some things on that album that are really interesting and remind me of other things, and we'll talk about that at a later date. What I never realized about Warning, though, and it took me a bunch of listens this week to even come to this realization, there are several elements on Warning that are a direct precursor to things that you would hear on American Idiot. And I never realized it because I always thought of Warning as a bit of an outlier, kind of that just transitional album between Nimrod and American Idiot. But in retrospect, a lot of this stuff could have been on American Idiot and you wouldn't have known any better. And so I find that interesting. But gone is the punk because there's very little on this album that I would say, if anything, that would fit on those first 3 or 4 Green Day albums.
I was surprised when, and I'm going to just speak very briefly about Nimrod, which was the album that bridges the gap between these two albums. And our friend Nick he had that album and he let me borrow the CD, and he's like, you got to listen to this. Like, it's not just, hitching a ride and Time of Your Life. The album has 18 songs on it, which was like unheard of for a Green Day album. And it really had a lot of meat on the bones. And I remember thinking to myself, like, there's a lot of really interesting songs here. And the band is again expanding their sound a bit more. And then I feel like by the time Warning came around, it was kind of like we're just going to write an album like the way we want to and not really do. And I feel like for that reason, it didn't really pop for a lot of people. And I don't think that there's a lot of songs on this album that people really remember or look back on fondly. Probably the title track along with Waiting and Minority are probably the two most well-known tracks. I think Minority is still pretty standard in the set list. But some of my favorite Green Day songs are on this album, and nobody really talks about them. It's interesting how much technology has changed from Insomniac to Warning. You told a story about going to a store and getting Insomniac a couple of days before it was released from a record store. Warning was leaked onto Napster 3 weeks before it came out.
Wow.
Which some people say has something to do with why it had lower album sales. Because now we're in this, right around this time where we're in music piracy is Napster's at full force. I remember downloading the video for Minority from whatever the video sharing, program was on the high speed internet at college, having like that, landline for the first time ever. And I bought this album in the school store, at Scranton.
Wow.
They actually sold CDs in the school store. And I remember going there, and I probably paid some asinine amount of money for it, like $25 for a new CD, but I had to have it. I had every other Green Day CD. Why wouldn't I buy this one? I was still in that mode that even though the digital music was becoming a thing, I still felt the need to own a record. And so I remember clearly getting that and listening to it a lot when I was a freshman in college. And so, yeah, like I have a lot of fond memories, and I've always considered this to be the most underrated Green Day album.
Yeah, I want to get into it. I know you mentioned that title track as being one of those songs that, I don't know, I guess stand out or that people remember. And they kick off with that song. And I guess it does set the table for what this album is. There's an acoustic guitar on here that is a tone they would come back to several times on the album. I think this overall sound is just more focused songs, less punk influence, and more just like rock or alternative rock throughout. And this song is one of those songs because it doesn't have the balls that some of those other early Green Day songs do, but it's still very catchy and makes for a very good opener. And it's interesting because it clocks in at 3 minutes and 42 seconds, which is not the longest song on the album, but it would have been the longest song on Insomniac by probably 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's a quote from that Billy Joe had said in 2020. He said, "I think we have transitional records. When I look back now on both Nimrod and Warning, we were pushing ourselves in a different direction. Without those records, there wouldn't have been an American Idiot or 21st
Which is
Century
exactly what I was saying. And so I'm glad that I'm not completely off base. I apologize for cutting you off.
No, not at all.
But what do you think of the way this starts? Are you a fan of that track?
I actually hated this song for the longest time, and I think maybe just because it was such a weird departure from anything I had heard Green Day do before. It's actually grown on me quite a bit over the years. Another really cool music video of much in the way that Walking Contradiction was. It's just like kind of a funny tongue-in-cheek video of like a guy looking up at the sun, just like doing all the things you shouldn't do. And so Warning being the lyric or the title of the song. Really clever music video, and the song really has grown on me over the years, and it makes for a really interesting opening track. And I think you said it really well that like it kind of sets you up for like this isn't going to be what you thought it was going to be. Like as far as a Green Day album comes, it's just kind of like probably easily their most experimental record to date up until this point. I think that they showed signs of it on Nimrod. I feel like they really went the whole 9 yards, especially with songs like this and Misery. Like they really kind of changed, or not changed, but just said like we're not just going to do standard fast paced punk rock songs, even though they do that. There's just more variety, I would say, on this one.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. And we get to track number 2, Blood, Sex, and Booze, which admittedly came on in the car with the kids, and I skipped it for obvious reasons. This song has a similar cadence to the opener, but it really reminds me a lot more of Foo Fighters than it does the Ramones. The verses have this bouncy quality to them. They're fine. Chorus slightly heavier, catchier, and probably helps make the tune a little more interesting as a result. I like how the ending gets a slightly thrashier feel to it, and it's quite frankly, I think, one of the better songs, or I should say the best part of the song is later on. I do prefer the second half of this one.
This song always made me think of Dominated Love Slave from Kerplunk, which it was like the first song I think that we heard Trey sing. Because it's that kind of, I think there was another track too on Dookie that had that same lyrical vibe of just being like, like masochistic and like enjoying like being like beaten or whatever in kind of like a sexual manner. But I remember when I first heard this song and I was like, oh shit, like I don't think I've ever heard Green Day do a song like this, and I love it. It's so good. Like it toes that line between being like this kind of mellow mid-tempo song to being like a very aggressive and thrashy, like you said, tune. And it does a great job of going back and forth. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. I don't know that it's my number one song on the album, but it's probably top 2 or 3. Like I think it's such a great, talk about an underappreciated Green Day song. This is one that they should, this and the next song, Church on Sunday, both should be brought out of the attic and played live.
So Church on Sunday, we talked about Hardcore Superstar. They don't celebrate Sundays. Green Day does by going to church, right? If I had a song of the week for this album, I'd probably have it be Church on Sunday. I like this tune a lot. Definitely more of an upbeat feel. This reminds me of a precursor to American Idiot. This is one of those Bridge the Gap songs. The chorus is really fun, heartwarming, simple riffs, but nice little drum fills, a great vocal performance, and it just makes for a great song. I feel like this is a song they've never, as far as I know, played live, or at least not recently, and I would love to hear it. I feel like this is a song nobody talks about, but they should be talking about it.
They definitely played it when the album came out, but I don't think they played it on any like subsequent tours, at least not with any sense of regularity. Because I think once American Idiot came out, like they were basically playing most of that album, and that was taking up a big portion of their set list. But man, this is probably my song of the week from this album too. To be honest with you, I absolutely love this song. Always have. There's just this infectious, like toe tapping, enjoyable, it's just a fun song. And it does it, and it's not like Stewart and the Avenue, where it's like it feels upbeat, but the lyrics are kind of like downtrodden and depressing. It's really just kind of like this tongue in cheek joke, like about dating a religious girl and being like, if I go to church with you on Sunday, will you go out with me on Friday night? I always thought that was kind of a fun little lyric, and just like especially after Insomniac, where it's like so not ham-fisted, but it's just very apparent that the band is in a very angsty sort of place. This really feels more like we're kind of falling into doing what we want to do and not really worrying so much about what people think we're supposed to do. And I think, like you said, American Idiot 4 years later, I think is just going to be like that. That was like the rebirth of Green Day in so many ways, both like popularity wise and artistically. But this is like another really, really great underrated song by the band. And I always have held it in very high regard.
I kind of forgot about Fashion Victim, the next track. It's an enjoyable tune. I just kind of forgot about it. I feel like the vocal range, or Billy Joel's vocals, kind of pushed some boundaries on this one. Not their best song by any means, but catchy enough, and you kind of find yourself tapping a little bit to that beat. I just wish that the bass was a touch higher in the mix as it was on the earlier albums, because I feel like it would have stood out on a song like this. But again, a decent song. I don't know that I have too much to say about it.
Another track where like you would think it was some sort of hidden meaning or like, whatever. No, it's really just about like the band kind of crapping on like, high fashion and big name fashion designers and stuff like that. it's like we don't need to like beat around the bush. We're just gonna just write the lyrics about how we feel, and that's just how it is. And so I always thought this was kind of a fun, like more of a mid-tempo tune after Church on Sunday was a little bit faster and just kind of slows it down a little bit. It's a catchy tune. Probably not my favorite tune on the album, but like I will say my least favorite songs on Warning I like more than my least favorite songs on Insomniac. I just think that,
so it's more balanced for you.
Yeah, exactly. I think my favorite songs on Insomniac I like more than my favorite songs on Warning, though. So there's, like you said, more balance, I think, for this one for me. But I like this song quite a bit, and wouldn't be sad to hear it live. Wouldn't probably be on like my 30 song set list, but just for something different, I would be excited to hear it.
What are your thoughts on Castaway, the next track?
The Tom Hanks movie or the Green Day song?
Both. I'll accept both.
I enjoy both quite a bit. This is another song that is kind of like a forgotten tune that I think is it has more of a faster tempo than the previous track. Catchy as hell chorus. I like the song a lot, and it's another one of those tunes where I think it's just like especially now the band has so many songs, especially at one point they released like 3 albums in the span of like 6 months or something. So they have quite a bit of a catalog at this point. So there's definitely going to be songs that fall through the cracks over the years. This is one of them, though. I think this is such an underrated tune. It's super catchy. It shows that the band can still write a really hooky chorus. I like this one a lot, and I think it really is a perfect song to bridge the gap between the mid-tempo of Fashion Victim and then Misery, which is just Green Day doing something totally different that they've never done before. And to me, it's arguably the most fascinating Green Day song ever written.
I'm going to talk about Misery in a second, but I'll just say when it comes to Castaway, that guitar tone in the beginning reminds me of something that Nirvana was doing just a couple of years before this. Well, I guess several years before this. But it sounds like something that would have been on Nimrod. I see a parallel between this and the prior album. Solid tune, very catchy. The instrumental section gives gives all 3 guys kind of a chance to shine, and it ends nice and clean. I like this song a lot. But you're right about Misery. This is a long song, which is really different for the band. It has this eerie circus-like keyboard sound at the beginning, which I cannot believe I'm saying about a Green Day song, but listen to it if you think I'm crazy. And once it gets going, it almost reminds me of like sitting around the fire pit telling camp fireplace stories or something like that. Interesting lyrics, some really cool sound effects. The acoustic guitar is back. The drums sound like they're triggered, and it stands out because of the odd cadence and the accordion. This is all over the place, and it's interesting because the song never really takes off, and you're waiting for it to just kick into that next gear, and for me, it really doesn't. Not to say I don't like it. It's just not what I expected.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard this song, and I was like, what? I thought like it reminded me of like a song that you would have heard walking down the streets in Italy. Like it had this kind of like this European folky kind of vibe to it. And then like the lyrics itself are really an interesting dichotomy against the song kind of has like this chipper kind of vibe to it, but the lyrics are like super dark and like just about like people kind of coming to their end because of like poor choices. Interesting. It was compared in this book to a song that Bob Dylan would write, where it's like a collection of short stories in a single song, similar to like Desolation Row. And it's interesting again to like kind of tie into your point about this album kind of being a precursor to American Idiot in a lot of ways. The first part of the chorus, "We're gonna get high, high, high when we're low, low, low," could be based on Wings' 1972 hit "High, High, High," Misery, and the Who's "A Quick One While He's Away," or I should say, Misery and the Who's "A Quick One While He's Away" served as prototypes for American Idiot, so it kind of makes sense. American Idiot, as a lot of people realize, became a Broadway show, and I feel like this song would have fit a Broadway kind of style, performance in such a great way. I feel like this was such a missed opportunity to make a really cool music video. I really don't understand how they never made a music video for this song, because the lyrics are so visual and so descriptive that I feel like it would really have made a cool music video with the band just kind of like being in the background while all these other people are like experiencing misery in their lives. So I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity, but I think this is really one of the most fascinating songs the band ever wrote.
Yeah, because it's nothing like anything they did before it. This was the first time in many ways they were doing something like this.
Accordions, mariachi, brass, like it's
all there.
Really it's all over the place, but it's a cool track.
That said, being a sucker for that kind of old sound, Deadbeat Holiday was another one that could have been a song of the week for me. Another precursor to American Idiot. The album itself, American Idiot, shouldn't be a surprise after you hear a song like Deadbeat Holiday. I love how it picks up steam throughout. I think the chorus is amazing, but it reminds me of something. Does this chorus remind you of anything that we talked about earlier?
I'm not really. No, I'm not really sure.
The chorus of Deadbeat Holiday may as well have been the same exact chorus from Pride. No Pride, rather, that we just talked about. There's and so even though I love this song, sleigh bells and all, I'm not making it my song of the week because I almost made No Pride my song of the week, and I think it's just a little bit better version of this song, but a little bit of plagiarism. But I guess when you plagiarize yourself, you have to give it a pass.
I found myself singing along to the song while I was working. Like I forgot how much I enjoyed. Like it's such a catchy tune, and again, it's just like one of those. Another one, like this album is just full of hidden gems. I feel like, and this is another one, another really good tune. I hope that like Green Day at some point starts doing more of the like they did last year with playing all of Dookie and American Idiot. Like this is like my version of that, where the band plays all of Insomniac and Warning. I would honestly, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I would rather see that than see them play all of Dookie and American Idiot, even though I probably will rank those albums higher than these two.
Because when you're a massive fan, you want to hear the obscure stuff. If I was seeing Halloween play a show, I don't know that I would pick Keeper 2, even though I think the album is unparalleled in the world of power metal.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And Pearl Jam's another band I feel that same way about, where it's like I'd rather hear deep cuts, except they actually play them.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But I assume that you like this one as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really catchy tune.
So we move on then to Hold On. And I always said to myself, is this a Beatles song or a Paul Simon song? Because it starts with harmonica and this heavy use of cymbals. Regardless, it's short-lived, and ultimately I think the verses are almost like chicken soup for the soul. It just has this very warm and endearing quality to it. It transitions really well into the chorus, and I think this is another underrated song where there's these bass lines that really pop. But I'm a big fan of Hold On, and I'm not going to say I remembered it all that well, but going back to it, it holds up well.
I think this album might have the best mid-tempo Green Day songs, because this is just another one where it's like, even though it's a mid-tempo song, it's just got a hook to it that really pulls you right in. And it's funny, Billy Joe had said that the song was, or at least the album was influenced by Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home. But like you said, it comes closest to Beatles songs like Love Me Do, Please Please Me, or I Should Have Known Better, because it just opens up with that harmonica, which, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who knows better, but like I can't remember if we've heard our harmonica in a Green Day song up to this point.
I don't think so.
Maybe in Misery, but before that, not so much. So like, again, they're kind of pulling, this is almost like a throwback. It's like taking some elements of 60s rock and kind of mixing it with the Green Day, trademark. So yeah, like again, this is another kind of offbeat kind of song because it doesn't really have that like punk rock feel to it, but it's just a really feel good, enjoyable tune. I enjoy and you know, not like you're going to talk a ton about solos talking about Green Day, but this is just like a really enjoyable solo section. You know, just a really cool tune. I like this one.
They would trade in the harmonica and go to a banjo on Jackass, which is kind of interesting. Again, they're all over the place, but they're writing more mature songs. They've obviously grown up a lot and are in a much better headspace than they were even 5 years ago. When the guitar comes go, this is a melodic tune. It's got some futuristic sounds to it in spots. And again, that transitional nature of the album, I think, expresses itself on Jackass. This is another one that I would love to see live. It's a deeper cut, but because it's so melodic and catchy, I feel like it would go over well live.
Only if Doug Meek comes out and plays the saxophone solo live, like that would be. And I guess being that the band does play King for a Day live pretty often, which is a very brassy kind of song from Nimrod, like I feel like this would be not a hard sell. Yeah, another really fun tune. Maybe not one of my favorite songs on the album, but just as like a really nice tempo to it, and just like it has a real kind of like snap your finger and tap your toe, and it's a good little tune. I don't know, it's kind of almost a precursor to the show Jackass. I don't know which one was first, or they both had to be right around the same time. I don't know if there was any connection there, but it's again very straightforward lyrically. It's just about a guy with, you know, whose jokes are overplayed, and you know, it's just kind of like, you know, if you could see me right now, like, look at this guy, you know, like, shit's getting old, pal. So yeah, kind of again another straightforward kind of tune, but very, very enjoyable.
What did you think of Waiting when you went back and listened to it?
This was like to me, like this was like the big, I think the single where they were trying to get like the most, I don't know. I'm not saying that like they were trying to recreate, you know, Time of Your Life, which was such a big hit for them on the previous album, but there's something very like commercial and bubblegum, I think, about this track. It's a good track. I still like it. I haven't grown tired of it, mostly because I think it kind of got forgotten with the rest of most of this album. It's catchy. I like it. I don't love it, but I like it. It's just, I just feel like it was kind of, at least at the time, was a little bit overplayed. And it's another music video I remember pretty fondly. I think it was like the band was like playing in the middle of like a house party or something. But yeah, it's just like a good another good mid-tempo Green Day song. It's
not my favorite song on the album, but I would argue it might be the best song on the album, if that makes sense. Just top to bottom, a really good song. Great verses, that kind of standard early 2000s chorus that makes for a real earworm. Very good mix on this song, and it just doesn't get the love that some of the other songs do, including Minority, which I should note, Jen wanted me to say, I had this on in the car, and she's like, this is so far and away the best tune on the album, Minority, that for what it's worth, I had to mention that. And this is still the one they play live from the album. I saw them play it live when I saw them on their last tour. And the harmonica comes back for another appearance. And all I could help but saying to myself with Minority is, here's a single, but it's such a far cry from Dookie, let alone the debut, that this is for all intents and purposes, a different band by this point.
Yeah, no doubt. I mentioned the music video earlier, and I could still picture that just a parade going down the street while the song is being played by the band, and it's just such a visually perfect counterpoint to the song. Yeah, like you said, the harmonica's back. My favorite part of the song is when it gets to the solo section, and like the guitar and the drums are just so powerful, and it just like really gets me every time. Like, oh yeah, like I know, again, it's not metal, but like it still has like that power. The power of music just gets me every time. This is just one of those songs where like I never get sick of it. Like I might even put this on my set list of 30 songs just because I like it that much. And like, even though it was a single, it was just like the right single at the right time. And I understand why the band still plays it. There's just something about hearing it live, especially like the part towards the end where you hear the accordion, and like that was always a perfect spot for like the band to just kind of like play the riff over and over again, and they could like talk to the crowd and introduce everybody in the band and that sort of thing. I always like this a little bit more than King for a Day as like that kind of like penultimate live track where it's kind of like, you know, your first or second encore song or whatever. That's just a really like high energy banger. Yeah, it's a great song, and like I think it's a great choice as like the last of the like non-ballads, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, because it ends with an interesting song called Macy's Day Parade. The acoustic guitar is back, but it sounds really good when you combine it with that bass. And again, you talk about an album of firsts. This song has orchestration, and I'm not sure that they'd ever done that before this particular song. It's a repetitive tune, but it's certainly expanding their horizons, and it's not my favorite, but it is interesting because it's just a really unique way to end an album.
I love this song, and I wish that they would replace Time of Your Life with this as kind of like that last song of the show. If you're going to play something that's kind of like, has like kind of an emotional feel to it, I think this is a better, less overplayed version of Time of Your Life. And you know, you mentioned the orchestrations. Time of Your Life was probably the first song where they really played around with that kind of song. And I think that once they realized that it worked, they wrote another song that's kind of in that vein. I just think this is a better song. I always have.
Yeah, listen, I get it. And it doesn't have the miles on it that Time of Your Life does. But this is an interesting album. And again, it's not my favorite Green Day album by any means. I don't even know if I would put it in my top 5. I'll be frank, but there's good stuff on here. And again, I don't think you get to American Idiot without it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it would be a while. And it's interesting. Like we'll go into more detail about the whole creation of that album when we talk about it. But you know, just as a preview, like they had an entire album recorded and the whole thing got lost. And so rather than try to like recreate it, they were like, let's just start from scratch. And from that came the, you know, probably the most well-known Green Day album ever outside of Dookie, maybe more than Dookie. I don't know. Like it completely catapulted the band back into everybody's, you know, purview. I will mention, just circling back quickly to Minority, I feel like that song is in a lot of ways a precursor to American Idiot, at least as far as lyrically, because it's, you know, I think one of the earlier points where Green Day started toying around with lyrics that were again like anti-establishment, and particularly, you know, George Bush. I think at the time, like he was running for president, like he wasn't even president yet. And, you know, American Idiot would be like the ultimate middle finger to the president. But, that like Minority was almost them like revving up the engines for when the time would come to really go up against Bush and his administration. So I thought that was, kind of an interesting point. I feel like I've always felt like kind of like I'm the only person on earth who like loves this album, like as one of their favorite Green Day albums. And in all honesty, I can't in good faith give it a less of a score than Insomniac. So I'm going to keep this one at a 9,
Wow.
Just like the last one. I just really, really love these two albums. And that's pretty much why I was compelled to discuss both of them simultaneously.
So it's a 7.5 for me. I think it's a very good album and I can enjoy it. But when I want to listen to the band, I usually go back to the more, to the roots or to American Idiot or something like that. But I certainly can acknowledge there's great stuff on the album. So thank you for choosing both of them. I thought this was a really interesting exercise. And I look forward to doing more of them in the future, but not next week. Next week, we're going to do something a little bit different. But before we talk about that, I've got one news item that I would be simply remiss not to discuss. Rush is back. Rush is going out on tour. The two original, members, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, going out on tour together and playing several shows. In fact, additional shows got added today. They're doing only 7 cities, apparently, in North America, doing 4 shows at Madison Square Garden, Toronto, Cleveland, Texas, Chicago, Mexico City, and LA. I'm so excited to see Rush again. This has to feel like a bit of a redemption arc for you, even if it's not the full original, the full Rush lineup.
Oh my God, yeah. This has always been, along with Van Halen, probably my 2 biggest bucket list fails of my life. And so even though Neil Peart, who's no longer with us, I mean, getting to see Geddy Lee sing these songs with Alex Lifeson and do you happen to have the name of the drummer in front of you? I don't know it off the top of my head.
Her name is Annika Nils, or
yes.
Niles. And it's fascinating because I never heard of her before, but apparently she's a German drummer who's toured with Jeff Beck and several other artists. So big shoes to fill, but I look forward to hearing her play. Yeah,
I can't imagine that she would not have been chosen unless she was really had the chops and kudos to the band for choosing a woman, like, just to be a little bit more outside the box. I've seen some, what's the number one advice I give you? Don't look at comment sections. Well, I made the mistake of looking at some comment sections, and of course there's people going on like, how do you label this as Rush and all this shit, and it's like, And I love, like, the people that are like, yeah, do you remember that Neil Peart wasn't even a fucking original member of Rush? Like, I don't know. Like, there's bands, DGM doesn't have anybody in the band whose initials are DG or M from when the band was first started. And I know I'm comparing DGM to Rush. It's like, a little bit of a stretch, but shit happens. Halloween has 2 original members, or, well, now they have 3, but I mean, bands continue on and they evolve and like.
And you know what? I believe Neil Peart would have wanted it this way. I don't think that he would have wanted to see his brothers that he was together with for 50 years just drop everything because, of his untimely passing. I'm sure, there was rumbles that he was not well, even before he died, that they weren't going to be able to play. I'm sure that he would be thrilled to see his brothers play and continue the legacy of his music.
Yep, and his family seems to have no issue with it either. So, like, I friggin' hate online gatekeepers, and it's just like, look, I'm not a diehard Rush fan, but they are a band that I've really wanted to see live, and I plan on making every effort to see one of these shows, provided that it doesn't cost an absurd amount of money to attend. But even still, I'm willing to expand my usual, cap on what I'm willing to spend for a concert because of the legendary status, and especially for the fact that I've never seen the band live before. So I listen, like, I'm in on this. So, like, if you're that big of a fan, or so-called that big of a fan, that this isn't real Rush to you, stay home. I don't think ticket sales are gonna, be an
suffer
issue
because one person doesn't go to the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a handful of people that are like that, and whatever. That's that's their prerogative. But like, it's just as much the band, the 2 guys left to say we're Rush. Like, even if they said we're not Rush, we're Speedy or whatever. People are going to this concert, so it really doesn't matter what it's called. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're playing Rush songs. It's got 2 of the members of the Rush in it. I think calling it Rush is pretty fair.
I don't disagree at all. I had an album picked out for next week for the longest, and it was an anniversary album, but I'm going to pick it instead for my first pick in November because I think it fits there just the same as it would now. So I'm calling an audible and not picking that album because there's another anniversary album that I want to pick. It is a band we have not talked about, although we have talked about one of the key cogs in this machine for this particular album. I'm going back to 2005. I'm going back to the debut album from Stream of Passion because I want to talk about Embrace the Storm next week. An album that I admittedly don't know nearly as well as I should, even though every time I listen to it, I'm like, this album is great. So it's been a while. I look forward to doing a deep dive. And over the years, I've just become such a fan of Marcella Bovio's vocals that I just wanted to talk about her in long form. And oh, by the way, podcast alum Arjun Anthony Lucasen happened to be the guitarist and songwriter on that album. So that's what we're going to do next week, something a little bit different. And then I will go back to my other choice in a few weeks.
I have a great story regarding that album. I will save it for next week. It's an album that I listened to more so when I found out the band was going to be playing at Prague Power to get kind of prepped, and I was like, wow, this is... I wish I had listened to this more when I first became aware of it, because it's a really good album. So great choice. I look forward to revisiting it. I haven't listened to it in a while, so good choice. And I have something queued up for the following week. I promise it's not another Green Day album, although, man, I could have talked for another 3 hours about that band. It's just, you could tell it's just a love of mine. So thank you for doing 2 albums in 1 week. I know it's not something we typically do, but I appreciate you humoring me. It felt like to me like doing one without the other I would have felt like half empty inside. And so rather than put myself through such drama, I dragged you through 2 albums, which I think this Stream of Passion album is probably about just as long as the 2 Green Day albums
That's
combined.
true.
So
it all evens out.
Yeah, it shouldn't take too much longer to listen to. So yeah, that's what I love about this podcast. I hope our friend who ragged on us for doing a Foo Fighters episode back in January is paying attention. And has some clever comments to make on YouTube. We could take it. So bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. I enjoyed it. Thanks for choosing it. And I look forward to coming back next week and talking all things Stream of Passion. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will catch up with you soon.
All right. Have a good one, buddy.